Recording in progress.
Hello, ladies. I'm going to talk about CRx real quickly as far as some stuff that I learned and as far as from yesterday. And I talked to some of you at various stages, but I just want to be sure we're all on the same page. Obviously, yesterday was extremely kind of confused, at least to some degree. Pastor Rondeau gave me some encouragement, and he said, "Yep." He says it's going to be that way until he says, but things will settle in. He says, it's new. I had on my end, I had people losing their passwords, and people who couldn't log in, and people who had logged in and then they couldn't log in again because they forgot their password, things like that. So there's a lot of miscellaneous stuff, including the CRx. But we're going to look real quickly at CRx, and I'm going to use a few students as kind of our test cases. First of all, the benefit of CRx. We're going to go to Gradebook, and if you don't know, this is kind of how you can navigate anything. But go to Gradebook. Especially on the CRx, and I'm going to look at the student right here, and in particular their language arts. So if you look, if you open language arts, they did the CRx for the first unit, vowels, main idea, and capitalization. Okay, here's the benefit. They got a 98. So if you actually it'll look up here, the unit, it says it's 100%. So literally, he passed. This is CRx in action, I guess, if you will. He passed it. He obviously knows this. We started him on level, but he apparently knows this, and he got a 98 on it. All right. So if you actually look at we'll call it the pace or the unit, you can see. Beyond reading the course overview, it's skip. Everything is skipped. All right. It does have a review game. I think that's optional. I don't think that's a good. Matter of fact, they've already made it. They've already done it. And then there's a reference. That's nothing big deal. So basically, by scoring a 98, CRx turned it all off. All right, if you go and this is something that I think Mrs. Poisson questioned, and I didn't have an answer for her right off the bat. But somebody had like a 37 or a very low score, and you looked and everything was skipped. And she says, "Okay, that doesn't make any sense." Well, it has to do with the status of it. Once it's closed out, there's something, once we close it out, then CRx kicks in. What I found out yesterday that I did not know is using this student again as the test case. They haven't started Unit 2 yet. 0%. They have made no attempts on the pretest. And look at the status. Everything is skipped. So what happens is the default, and this is my terminology, not theirs. They kind of hesitated a little bit when I said default, but the default status, I don't know what else you would call it, is skipped. When you haven't started the CRx yet, everything is skipped. When you take the CRx, depending upon what your score is, it will be adjusted. All right. So that is one thing to note. The other thing is note this one here has no due dates. Now this pretest is due October 1st. But notice there's no due dates on any of the lessons. Why? Because they haven't taken this yet, and we don't know how that's going to pan out. The due dates are populated once you take the CRx, and we're going to look at another student, and we're going to see that. All right. So let me go to another student, and we're going to go to right up here. And we're going to take a look at language arts again, first unit. So I heard, from some of the students, the parents, I talked to at least 2 or 3 parents on the phone and had a conversation about CRX. And once I explained it to them, they got it, and they were trying to encourage the kids. But some of the kids just don't like it. They don't like tests. And I get that. I had 3 kids, and one of mine didn't like tests at all. But, the student got a 72, which depends on how you look at it. It's not bad. He just barely missed passing it. If he'd gotten over an 80, unless we overrode it, he would have passed the PACE test, or he would have skipped out. But notice what happened. He got a 72. We gave him a second attempt, which normally it's only one, but we went in and gave him a second attempt. Some of the students were getting out of their CRX, or it was timing out because they weren't, there is an alert that says when you start this, you got to finish it, but a lot of the kids weren't reading that. So once this was finished, notice what happened. Now, the first student had passed it, so there was no due dates. This student didn't pass it, but due dates are populated, and if you look what his 72 got him, he doesn't have to do lesson 3. He doesn't have to do lesson 5. He doesn't have to do lesson 9 or lesson 10. He doesn't have to do lesson 14 or lesson 17. Now, I'm not going to go back through and read all the others. Now, don't get confused by some of these. I'm not covering like quizzes skipped and all that. There's alternate quizzes, and you can go in and look at an unopened unit that hasn't been started yet, and you'll see some stuff is already blocked because it's an option. All right, but once he took the CRX, immediately what it did do is assign due dates on what he had to do. For instance, due tomorrow is sources of English words. All right, they have started it, so they're actually ahead. I won't get into all of that except to say that when I was setting Ignatia up, they actually had me push back the due dates like 2 days. And they said it doesn't hurt the kids at all, but it gives the teachers a little bit of a breather because there's so much going on. And so they highly recommended this. So this student is started it yesterday. They made 1 attempt. They don't have a score yet, so they must not be done. But you see the due date. The quiz, we already know, actually this quiz is blocked at the moment. Once they complete, really all they're going to have to do is lesson 4. And once they do lesson 4, you would get an alert that they're ready to do the quiz, and you would unblock it. And if you go down through, I won't read, but you see this due dates for what has been assigned. So the CRX not only takes care of skipping lessons, but it also sets the due dates for what needs to be done. All right. And I haven't got into this yet. Viewpoint actually has the kids do gold cards anyway. I haven't got to that point yet. I'd like to see us get into it a little bit, and then once the kids are maybe a little more familiar with how things work, we can talk about whether we want them doing a gold card. But to some degree, they do have an overview of when things need to be done. All right, so that's what I wanted you to see there as well. What about the student that didn't pass it? What does that benefit? And even obviously, if they get a fairly low score, and I won't go into them. If you want to take the time, you can look at some of the students. Some of them were getting in the 30s, or 40s, or 50s. There was little or no benefit. Some of them, I think I looked at somebody that was like a CRX of around 40 or 50, and there was one lesson skipped. There was something that they had done very well on. So it did take literally the equivalent of 1 goal off. So, encourage the kids as they're doing this and say, okay, this is a benefit. You can potentially reduce your workload. All right, we're going to look at one more situation, and that is the one that probably caused the most problems. We're going to take a look at another student, and let me get down to them. And this is the I can't type an answer. All right, so we're going to go into math, unit 1. They got an 82 eventually on this particular one. You know, if you want to come in later, I won't read down through. So technically, they passed this test. Everything is skipped. So just like Liam. So there's some little victories in here, I guess, if you will. Is we have some kids that are showing that they've you know, they have mastered this. But let's go in and let's look at this pretest. Now, here's what was happening, and you'll see this is in the teacher's view. You see what they got right, partial credit, what they got wrong. Okay. I was just having a conversation with Mrs. Church, and you can do this even with lessons, and I might do a separate video on this. If this were a lesson and not a pretest, and they didn't get 100%, which is what we require, and they've maxed out, we have two options. We can tell them, okay, listen, you know, you did pretty well on this. I'm going to let you kind of go by, but you may want to go in and review, you know, these questions, and make sure you understand. Obviously, you can let your conscience be your guide. Some kids you can trust to do that, others you can't. So, you know, we can have a separate conversation about that. And what you can actually do, and I'm not going to do it here because it would mess it up. Let's say this was a lesson, and I can actually do this on the pretest. I'm clicking 10, which they got wrong. I can reassign it. So if this was a lesson or even a pretest, if I wanted to, I could reassign it. And the next time the student goes in, it's going to show this lesson or this pretest as an assignment. So I could look at this. If this was a lesson, I could go through 18, 17, 13, 10, 8. The 8's a partial credit, and click reassign. Don't go up here. Go down in the question. So you go 8, reassign, 10, reassign, 13, reassign. And what it's going to do is reassign those questions. So that's another option you can do for the lesson that they don't get. You know, they got an 82, which is pretty good, but, you know, in ACE world, we require 100%, and we do in Ignatia. You could, you know, you could look at what they got wrong and say, okay, I think they're pretty much all set. So I'm just going to tell them, hey, go back in and maybe read those sections and make some notes and, you know, study. Or you could say, you know what, they got quite a few wrong. I'm going to reassign these and make them go in, and it will give them a 4th attempt. And in the scenario that I did with Mrs. Church, with Abby Adams, we actually did a 5th attempt. And it seems like you can go however many attempts you want. So I was just sitting there as the teacher making Abby go back in, and, you know, she had 4 or 5 wrong, and then she got 2 wrong. And I kept doing it until she got them all right. So that's another option, but you probably want to think about that. But the other thing I want to talk about is this right here. This is, I can't type. So if you click, for instance, 22, this is how it appears to you. And this is skipped, not that they skipped it. If they skipped it, it would appear as red. Okay, because they got it wrong, and there'd be no answer. I don't know if there's a situation like that. Yeah, okay, so this one right here, question 17, no answer. All right, so the student skipped that. In this situation, when I click 22, it says skipped. The CRx turns off some of the questions. And somebody asked me, well, then why are they there? Well, this technically is a pretest. I mean, we're using it as a pretest, but it's an alternate test. If you look at it in the unit, it's an alternate test, and the alternate tests are used as the CRx. And the alternate test could be maybe they've taken it once, so you're going to, or you think they might be aware of the first test or whatever the case is. So you use the alternate test instead of the original PACE test. But in this case, when we take the alternate test and make it into a CRx, it will decide that certain questions are not important for a CRx. And this is what we are running into. So this was not a system malfunction. Now, I was pulling my hair out at one point, not literally, but I had, you know, I had like 4 or 5 mothers messaging me. My kid can't enter, and I had a couple teachers. And when I had one, it was like, okay, you know, maybe it's a glitch. But when I had 4 or 5, and I started asking what they were using, and it was, Windows and Chromebooks and all, MacBooks. It's like, okay, something's really weird here. Well, this is what it was. But I will tell you another one because I had a student in my office that did this. They had a text box like this, and it wasn't skipped. They came up and said, the keyboard isn't working. Now, this was a younger student in this student's defense. I didn't even think about it, but I said, well, let me see it. And so I just automatically went down here and I clicked in the box and I started to type. And I was confused. And I said, I thought you said you couldn't type? And they said, how did you do that? This student hadn't clicked in the box. What they had done is they had read whatever the question was, and notice the cursor is gone, and they had tried to start to type. So we had two situations going on yesterday, and I'm going to do a parent video hopefully later on today, but I just wanted to cover that with you. So that's a quick thing on CRx. Now there's one more thing I wanted to talk about, and I changed some courses for a couple high school kids, for Brody and Lilla. There was nothing wrong, and so I'll explain kind of what happened. So let me look at, for instance, Brody, and I did the same thing for Lilla. What I did is I reassigned, whoops, that's not Brody, that's Layton. Let's get Brody up here. What I did is I reassigned one of the courses to not a CRX mode. And, whoops, I'm still on Layton. Okay. World Geography. Now, I had a couple Zoom training sessions or whatever you want to call it. I had one with Ignatia or chat, and then another one with Viewpoint, and I was talking to him about CRX, and that's how I kind of found some of this out. And Viewpoint took a look at this, and he was looking at my students, and he asked me, he says, why do you have World Geography CRX? Earth Science is actually an 8th grade ACE, and if I remember right, Brody may have done some of it, and I think Lilla did too. And there was some question about their English level. So he was kind of okay with all this. He said you could even probably turn CRX off in science, but he says when he gets a kid in high school, unless there's extenuating circumstances, he tends to not do a CRX for the reading comprehension courses. So in this case, World Geography, and that's why he said you could do science. He says sometimes I will leave CRX on for high school kids for language arts and math, and he says all the way through, he says it really is beneficial because there's concepts they may know and they don't have to repeat it. That's the only reason I did this, is he said I would highly recommend you take the CRX off. All it's going to do in this situation is probably just slow the kid up, because the chances are, unless you know he's had World Geography, he literally isn't going to test out of anything. Maybe there's one that he knows something about a certain country or a region and he gets lucky. That's the only reason I did this. So this happened with Lilla and Brody, and he said I would, in this case, edit the course. I would archive it and void it, mark it as not complete, and then re-enroll them in a non-CRX course. So that's why I did that. All right, so hopefully this is helpful on CRX. If you have any questions on anything, please let me know. We're definitely early on in everything. I do want to show you one other thing really quickly, and this is a student view. All right, so if you look at the student view here on this, this is actually somebody from Viewpoint. It's not one of our kids. He brought this up so we could see when a student is doing a placement test and they say, I can't enter, I can't do a certain question, it won't let me. Question 3 is skipped. Now you saw how it looked for us, it was gray. For the student, there is a black arrow above the number. And so they can do 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and then however many questions there are. but they can't do question 3 because it's skipped. So I just wanted you to see that, and I am going to show this to the parents too. All right, so I hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions, let me know. I appreciate what everybody has done. And if you do have something that you're not grasping or you have a situation, please do not hesitate to contact me. And I have been assured that they say a couple weeks, everything, the dust kind of settles and everybody gets into a routine. All right, thank you very much.